Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hope you guys are doing well today. um, Let me just verify that everything works well. Good. Here we are. Good. Excellent. Thanks again for joining. Um, Today we'll be going through the sequence of Taiji Qigong Shibashi Set 2, and as requested last week, we will be explaining a little bit more kind of the story of the Qi within the movement and how the movement of Qi, or how the form design the movement of Qi and create this kind of living painting as we're going through it. So hopefully that will help you understand a little bit better and remember a little bit better how the movement flow and how the sequence was designed and can go through. Um, this is, I would say, a personal interpretation. It's not something that Professor Lin explains specifically in this way, but it's based on all of his teaching of all the movements and how each movement work or affect the body. So in this way, it's a bit of a personal interpretation that hopefully will help you guys to remember and practice the form more easily. Good. So let's get started. um, I'm just getting into the movement. So what I'm suggesting for you today is that we'll do the movement as I'm explaining it. We'll maybe take some pause between each movement to link them a little bit together, but because it's not a purely theoretical explanation, rather it's an explanation that comes from the effect that the movements are doing within the body, then it's better to do the movement and feel it at the same time, and this way it makes more sense. And to start with the first movement, I'll actually explain a little bit more about the first four movements of Taiji Qigong Shibashi Set 1 so that you guys can understand the complexity or the added difficulty of starting a form the way we do in Set 2. So in set one, the first four movements are beginning the form and regulating the breath, which is the same name as the first movement of set two, which will then move into expanding the chest as we're opening the rib cage to breathe deeper, activating thoracic breathing. Then we have the waving the rainbow, which is just like waving a flag, waving a rainbow from side to side. And then we have separating the clouds, which connect through the center, expanding into the Wei Qi. And so here in beginning the form, regulating the breath from set two, we have the rising of the Qi and then the expansion into the Wei Qi as we're starting. The first three movements from set one, so the first movement we use it to help focus a little bit more on the lower abdomen, developing the lower dantian, developing that gentle rising and sinking of the qi, activating the circulation of qi through the body. And then as we move into the second movement, opening up the lung, we're also connecting more within the middle dantian and allowing this expansion to happen. So first movement in set one, we get the lower. Second movement, we start to open up and activate more the middle dantian. Then on the third movement, we go more up to connect the upper dantian, and then we have this movement of the waist activating the kidney, allowing also the return of the qi back through the lower. So we have this connection between upper and lower dantian that's happening. And then we have the separation or separating the cloud, which then go on into connecting the lower, middle, and upper dantian through the central channel. and then expanding into the Wei Qi all around us. Of course, this is, I guess, a deeper level of training. It's not just by doing the movement that you get all these effects, although doing the movement will start to open up the body so that these effects can develop later on. And there's a question of quantity and quality of qi being refined over time of practice that will allow these movements to express themselves in this way. So in the first movement of set 2, that added difficulty I was mentioning is that we are basically connecting the lower, middle, upper dantian, rising the qi and then expanding it into the wei qi. So we're expected to be able to have a similar movement of the qi within one movement, whereas in set 3, set 1, sorry, we're actually taking 4 movements to get into that state. So it's not, I say it's not expected of somebody who's beginning to be able to do this. It's something that will develop over time with practice. But by having this understanding in the back of our mind as we're doing it, then we're able to kind of grow and develop the sensation, feeling that connection of the feet with the earth, feeling the rising through the body all the way up, connecting to the top of the head, feeling that expansion happening through the weight sheet, through that bubble around us, sinking, reaching under. And so having this cycle happening, rising through the body and feeling the bubble around us. Once we have this global rising, we want to make sure that all the paths within the body are open and flow well, and that will have an effect of increasing even more so the circulation and the strength of the Wei Qi. So we have the cosmic's orbit, neither the micro or the macro, it's actually the combination of both, where we just want to get the Qi to circulate better once our own bubble has increased and is present. So now we can get our Qi to circulate and start to connect a little deeper between heaven and earth so that we have that generator set in place that will follow us through the whole practice. Once we have this movement of qi starting to flow through us, as we get the up and down, the circulation through Dumai and Renmai and through all 14 channels, then we move into the breeze swaying the branch of the willow tree, which has an impact a little more on the kidney. And we want to make sure that the earth chi is rising. The whole of set 2 has a bit more of a focus from earth up, earth chi rising through the body, strengthening the legs, strengthening this connection that we have with the earth so that the flow of chi can be stronger. Up. So we have, again, this connection down, the rising of the chi filling up all the way to the shoulders on both sides. And so since the chi is flowing through our body, that we've opened up our bubble, that we started the circulation, then we're using this to strengthen the roots, which are the kidneys, to make sure that the kidney can be strengthened and that the chi can rise all the way up properly. From there, we're moving into searching for the needle at the bottom of the sea, which allows us to have a bit more of a connection through the leg and making sure that the chi also can sink properly. Since the first movement was working a bit more on rising, the second one on circulating, third one went back to rising, and now we're making sure that the downward through the torso, through the legs is functioning properly. It's also a movement that helps regulate liver. So in a Chinese medicine perspective, the kidney, once they're strong enough, helps to feed the liver. And in this one, we want to make sure that the liver is not hyperactive and that the sinking function are properly installed between liver and gallbladder channel. Once we have this element of sinking, we're connecting into the expansion of the Wei Qi, the fisherman casting its net. And so as we move the Qi, as we strengthen the kidney, the rising, the sinking, now we're making sure that these two movements allow the expansion of the Qi outward, and we want to strengthen that. Generally speaking, just like when we have a wire and there's current passing through, the magnetic field of it becomes stronger. And the better the type of wire, the stronger the current, the bigger the magnetic field, basically. So what we want to do here is that within our body, as we start and get the chi to move, as we make sure it can flow properly everywhere, as we allow it to rise and then sink, we go back into finding that central axis between heaven and earth, and we just observe and allow this expansion of that bubble around us from that heaven and earth connection. So it's a bit more young compared to the cloud hands, which has a bit more of an inner absorbing sensation in set one. This one is an expansion of the chi outward, strengthening the Wei Qi, allowing it to grow, and having this connection from the organ from the inside as well, filling up, reaching all the way to the palm, all the way outwards and out. So again, just like in the first movement, we get the chi to flow through the body to strengthen the Wei Qi. This movement is more specifically about increasing that bubble even more. So as you'll notice, or if you're aware of the story of the chi through set one, set two also has a lot of those kind of loops that are coming through where we're not just doing something different in each movement, but there's um, a recurring aspect that we're finding over and over to form in different ways. So strengthening the Wei Qi through the rising and sinking as we have this expansion. And here we have a bit more of a lateral pushing of the Wei Qi as we feel that connection while feeling the central axis, which guides us and nourishes us so that this bubble can continue to grow. Feeling the roundness of it, from it, now we're connecting through heaven and earth in order to expand even further sideways the ability of the Wei Qi. And by doing so, we're connecting through the middle dantian to open it up and allow it to go a little further. In this one, we have a bit more of a connection through the upper dantian and the lower dantian, where the upper really expand, the lower still gathers a little bit more, allowing the shen to take up more and more space around, and gathering the jing to nourish the body as we're pushing out. And here we want to have this connection towards heaven. So starting connection to earth, rising up to heaven, sinking down, mixing them both into the middle dantian as we're moving through and opening to the side so that there's an expression of the chi sideways and releasing any kind of contraction or tension from the chest. So we're opening up sideways so we can push and let the chi rise. So up as I'm coming back, connecting to earth, rising, connecting to heaven, letting heaven sink, and passing through the center of the body, the mixing of two, allowing this full body expansion, although my focus is a little bit more to the side, and that expansion from one side to the other, there's still that strong connection happening on both. Up. for the immortal pointing the way. How's it going so far? For those of you who are watching live, if you have any question, let me know. Write them down in the chat. I'll give you a minute to see if that's clear. I'm going a little fast maybe, so I want to make sure that you guys have a bit of time to incorporate it. And since it's recorded, you'll always have the opportunity to listen to that video again to play with it and integrate it more. Just want to make sure that everything I said so far is clear. Good. No questions? If you have any, just write them down. I'll be continuing at this point and I'll answer them at the next stop. So we can look at the first 6 movement like a way to really get our chi to start to move, connects a little bit more with the base, connects between heaven and earth, making sure that the rising and the sinking are happening and the expansion takes place as well. And then the immortal pointing the way is kind of the combination of all of this together so that we feel our place within space between heaven and earth as humans, standing in between the two. Moving on from number 7 and the next 3 movements will have a very strong connection with the legs so that we start to develop even more the connectivity with the earth through the leg as well. So first, the child stretching its leg. As we have this rising, stretching of the heel, coming back, putting down, we want to create a stronger elongation through the Tai Yang, the Yang channel through the back that helps to grab the chi and let it sink through our body and down to the earth, making sure that our legs are strong and connected so that the downward aspect of the chi works well. Because if the yang can go through and deep down into the earth, then the yin of the earth will come back more naturally. So we have this stretching up from one side and the other. So inhale, exhale, in, out. The other side. And once you have this strong downward, then you can feel the rising, so you can connect a little bit more to heaven and be able to sink even deeper as you go into the stork praying at the moon. Up. The rising of the chi to heaven and allowing it to sink, using the legs a little bit more to support us, finding this stretch and bounce into the leg, this downward movement to help strengthen the leg. So we first want to stretch and make sure that they're relaxed and elastic before we go a little deeper in here, allowing the sinking on both sides, allowing the chi to go deeper into the earth and then coming back up and then sinking before we go to really pull the chi upward through the shoulders, through the arm, and into the palm. So again, here, more activity through the legs as we go into a bit of a deeper squat, and bounciness again up to get the chi to flow through and reach the palm. Good. So stretching the legs, getting the legs to be ready, going a little deeper, connecting to heaven to allow heaven to sink deeper so that once we start to pull the yin from the earth, we really start to fill up the body, feel the sensation reaching all the way to the palm, and have that strength present and supporting us. Once we have this aspect of the yin starting to rise up to the middle, we keep helping it to rise all the way above, becoming more and more yang, and allowing the shen to expand, shooting the arrow, and allowing the qi to go through, rising it up, allowing it to stretch up, and feeling that wider expansion of the Wei Qi, even more so through the layer of the Shen that's associated with it. So rising, that's why we want to make sure here that we get that feeling of a bubble of Qi between our hands that we can slide in and stretch to get this elastic pull sensation through that we can release just like a bow and arrow, and feeling that sensation of expanding our own bubble to go much further away and therefore penetrating deeper also into the earth. So we're still more connected through the earth, but the more we gather it, the more we can feel the connection also with heaven and having a bit more of that stretch all the way around. Now that we have this space around us open, we go into the twin dragons, go out to sea. A little more intense because of the weight shift of a movement than if we were just to do a simple feet together, rising and sinking. So we have this full on rising, but we also look through the angles to add a little bit of technical difficulty for the body to strengthen the back, feel how the right posture helps us to have a nice elongated structure, having the arm extended, and then as we move forward, feeling also that connection back and forth. So we're inhaling, feeling the rising through the back, filling up the body, supporting us, connecting all the way to heaven, and then sinking down the front foot, down the back foot, and feeling this downward sensation. Inhale, exhale. Adding the weight shift help with the strengthening of the legs, helps with finding the right movement where our weight should be moving between one and the other, which will then easily translate as we walk, allowing us to walk with more connection with the ground and to feel stronger as we're moving um, throughout the day in our daily life. Am I at this one? The undulating wave. Good. So after we've had this front and back, adjusting the connection between heaven and earth, then again, once we have the central axis, we play with the bubble, the weight sheet that's around us, feeling how we can expand it, feel it wide and big all around, up, feeling the sinking, in this case a little bit more, the rising, the floating sensation, up, the expansion of the weight chi being strong. So there's very often a combination of movement playing with the central axis before playing with the weight chi, or the other way around, opening up the Wei Qi so that we can feel a little bit more our central axis between heaven and earth being more connected. Good. And then here, taking a moment just to feel how is your central axis as you're standing, how is your Wei Qi. Feeling the expression of these connection passing through you. Good. Any questions on these 6 movements? Video might be a little behind, that's all right. Good. So if you guys have any question either from the first 12 movements, or if everything is good so far, we'll continue into the last part of the form. And of course, this is a very broad and general summary. It doesn't go into that many specific details for each of the movements. It's more to kind of see the conducting line or the storyline between each of the movements, how they move, how they go, how you can see the different pockets of repetition, even if we're doing different movements, how their effect on the movement of the qi becomes simpler, I guess. Bottom line, there's really, Chinese medicine, or even in Taoist philosophy in general, the way they express things, you start with the Tao, which is basically the whole in which everything is present. From there came Wuji, or nothingness, which allowed the space for things to happen, and then the separation of yin and yang, or the possibility to observe things in 2 different perspectives between yin and yang, because yin and yang are not separated, they're together, and they're always a comparison of function versus matter, or different aspect of things that we can look, okay, this one is slowing down a bit and this one is speeding up. From there, within the body, and we can look at it as being the creation of the embryo, the first separation between the first 2 cells, and then the development through. So within the human body, we have within 3, we have the 3 treasure, the 3 dantian, the 3 jiao, which are the 3 main micro and aerobiome. So we have this layer of 3 that starts to create a whole that becomes a separate entity, although it's part of the Tao of the whole where everything is. But from 3, we start to grow, and there's a way of presenting thing in Chinese that goes 1, 2, 3, 10,000, meaning that once you reach 3, after that there's a huge quantity of things that makes it easier to, or that makes it more difficult to start to calculate smaller things by group of 3. Then you move on, and there's many groups of 3 together that makes 10,000 things, if that makes sense the way I'm explaining it, hopefully. And so from there, we get into the movement of qi within the body, which are the 4 movement of qi: the rising, the sinking, the expansion, and the condensing aspect of it. So basically in Qigong, this is really all there is to do. And within those rising, sinking, expanding, condensing, then you have the combination of these 4 together that starts to create all the different variety that are happening inside the body and all the different process. But you can bring it down into up, down, expand, condense. From expand, condense, based on where you're at, you get the front, the back, the left, the right, or up and down. You could, put it sideways and have this kind of movement, but really to make things down to the simplest things, it's just rising, sinking, expand, condense. And that's all really we from a basic level, if we understand this, then all the more complex theory becomes very simple to follow. So hopefully I didn't lose you while trying to explain something complex in a simple manner. Let me see. I have two more questions here. Thank you, Beth. Well, yeah, there's two Beth right now. So thank you to both of you for writing. On stork praying at the moon, when you bring the hands down, it's not in the middle of the body, but to the side. Yes, that's right, Beth Nold. So when the stork praying at the moon, although the hand reach together above the head, as we're starting to come down, the hands come down to the side. And that goes with the slight rotation of the pelvic bowl because of the back leg and maintaining the shoulder facing forward. Now let me see the second part of your question. Is it because of a particular meridian we're working on? Yes, we're also working with the Chongmai a little bit more in this case. I believe you also followed the special series I did for acupuncturists. So in that one, there's a similar movement where we come down straight into the center, where we have that central axis that's in between the Dumai and Renmai. So we have the circulation front and back that creates a bit of a loop. And then there's what is often called, referred to as the Taiji pole, which is the straight line between Bai Hui and Hui Yin, connecting the center. So if I was in the center, I would be sinking through that center line. Here, as I'm opening and as I'm creating a bit of a sinking and coming down to the side, I'm focusing a bit more here on the Chongmai and specifically through the torso, up, and then opening again through the center, and then coming back down on the Chongmai on the other side as well. So it creates a bit more of work through the side, and getting this bit of a rotation with the waist also help with that connection. So we have a bit of the daimai involved as well. From a Qigong perspective, usually the daimai, chongmai works a lot together, similarly as the dumai and renmai work together to create a cycle. Hope that makes sense. Good. So let's continue. Now going into the, where are we at? Oh yeah, the lion cub playing with the ball. So we've just pushed the wave, expanded the wei qi. Now that we have this nice bubble around us, we're basically gathering it, allowing the qi to come and gather between the palm before we step out and allow it to expand towards heaven. So here, one aspect to make sure is that we're not just pushing straight out, but that's through the rotation, there's an out and upward connectivity happening. So my upper hand allow me to connect a little bit more towards the sky. Let me see if I took the right posture. There you go. Up, so that you have this upward connection towards the sky, this expansion of the chest out and connecting the chi upward towards the sky, allowing it to gently sink, and then gathering the chi at the same time to connect, stepping out and up. So as I have this expansion happening, I always have also that sinking, connecting towards the back leg and the solidity within the body. At first, when we start to do Qigong in general, we get certain sensation that are stronger in one part of the movement and then certain sensations stronger in another part. This is usually because our channel system is not yet full. As we start to move the qi, there's always a bit of an ebb and flow within the system. So where the stronger quantity of qi is moving, this is the part that's easier to feel. And then as we move it through another part, we feel kind of that movement. A little bit like when we breathe, we can feel the air entering into the lung, and when we exhale, we can feel that movement. So feeling a movement gives us a certain perspective, but as the quality and the intensity of qi starts to fill the channel, the difference between the full part and the empty part becomes less and less. And so for any upward movement, there's a sinking movement at the same time. For any sinking movement, there's an upward movement at the same time. We're just not feeling it quite as much, but it's always present. So the more we start to be full, the more we feel a global circulation happening within the body, and then gradually also between heaven and earth. And the less we get this, oh, this is going in one direction and this is coming back. So for teaching, we need to give the perspective in the broader direction, and then gradually, if things start, when the student starts to evolve, the perceptions start to shift. So it's important to keep in mind that uh, there's no absolute in a way in Qigong in how we're doing things. Qigong is a practice of proper posture with proper breathing, meditative state of mind, which then allow the sensation of qi to grow and develop and allow the qi to actually move through the body. So once we start to put all of these together, then the adjustment, the feeling can develop and really give us a lifetime of discovery coming out of it. So coming back to lion cub playing with the ball, as we're here gathering, allowing the chi to rise and to fill up the torso, fill up the space between the palm as well, taking the step, rotating, opening the ball to connect the ball to heaven. As we're connecting to heaven, there's that sinking of the heaven chi happening through the body as well. So my rising through the whole movement is actually there to allow a stronger sinking of heaven through the body. It's a little bit like sending out a kite with a long string attached to the ground during a thunderstorm so that the lightning can come down and connect to the ground. Although lightning are also starting from the ground up, but let's not go there for now. um, so lion cub playing with the ball. And so because there's a tendency within that movement to mostly focus on the rising, the next movement is, and because it's also a very young and kind of fiery sensation rising up, the next movement is to pick up the moon and sink it back down into the lower dantian. So we have this balance between the two movements. The moon being the celestial yin compared to the sun, which is yang. The moon in itself is an active and reflect the light from the sun, but by its reflection transform it as well. Therefore, it's not like just a pure mirror that would reflect the light of the sun, but it transform and polarize it. So it has a much more yin quality as it comes down to earth and how it affects life on our planet. So as we have the rising to reach out, the image that we're reaching out to the sky and feeling that we can gather this energy from the moon, allowing it to come down, sinking into the body and filling it or gathering it through the lower dantian, up, sinking, and as the lower dantian starts to be filled with it, there's that connection through the feet into the earth so that we can rise further, and allowing it to sink gently through the body into the lower abdomen. Again, from this gathering after the rising, the sinking. Now we have a bit of a harmonizing up and down with the phoenix spreading its wings. Which has a strong rising through the body connecting upward, and also a good sinking since we have all the weight on one leg, allowing that sinking connecting to the earth, shifting side, the rising that go a little higher, the sinking coming down. So in Taiji Qigong Shibashi set 1, we have a similar movement, which is done with both legs on the center. This one, since we go and we basically do a one leg squat, so it has a stronger effect on the legs, strengthening the body, reinforcing the base, and allowing us to have this lightness above and strength below. Up, 2 mountain peaks in front of the ear. Every movement, every set in Taiji Qigong Shibashi has one movement with the fist close. Taiji Qigong Shibashi set 1, it's just the straight punch. This one we have the 2 mountain peaks in front of the ears. And all movement that we do with the fist close are in a family of their own to help strengthen the jing, strengthen the body, and allow deep healing after physical trauma or deep emotional trauma that really depleted the body as well. So they have a strong strengthening of the body as we're doing them. The reason we're gently closing the fist, and the emphasis here is on gently, we want to keep a little bit of space, almost like if we're grabbing a small butterfly or small beautiful insect that we want to go show up to someone. So we don't want to squeeze the fist and make it tight, because then the butterfly looks all crappy and squish, and people don't like to see that, so it's not a good idea. And you kill the beautiful butterfly. So you just keep it with just enough space inside so that when the chi reach, it can actually just kind of spin around your hand instead of reaching towards the finger and opening through Lao Gong. With that closed position, it has that gathering inside, and at some point you actually start to feel the movement inside the hand, almost like if there was a little something vibrating and moving. So this gentle closing fist prevents us from having any leak through our hands, which allows us to have a stronger magnetic effect. The position with the finger also looks a little bit like a coil, an electromagnet. Therefore, when the chi reach and start to spin, it acts like a magnet, pulling the chi from the environment, sucking in it into the lower dantian. And then as we take our step, it guides the chi in this case towards the ears. So we want to make sure we're not, I don't know if you can see with the camera here, that we're not too high, but that the fist is at ear height, basically at the height of your nose. If you aim to your nose, you'll be at the right spot. As we inhale, pulling the chi into the lower dantian, here feeling that as we're about to take this step and we extend the arm slightly behind us, there's that pull from the what's the name in English? The lats. I'm sure the name is longer than that, but it's the only one that comes in. Allows to strengthen and hold the lumbar area properly. And then as you take your step, you have this opening of the arm, extend, and then that strength through the back, connecting to the back leg, although your weight is all in the front, and then having this kind of downward movement of the chi as we're here. And as we inhale, pulling it in a little more into the lower dantian, all the way connecting to the kidneys. The ears are the sense organ associated with the kidneys, so that they work together. And here, as we're pushing this intensity of the chi through the palm, connecting with the ears, allow to nourish the kidney from the yang from heaven penetrating and feeding it. So we have more of the yin for the kidney being connected through the lower body as we inhale, and then penetrating the yang from heaven, feeding the kidney as we do this. Up. So, and then circulating the qi through the lower dantian as we nourish the whole body as we're reaching the end of our session. The second to last movement can be considered really the last movement of the form, and it's usually the one that gathers the qi back into the lower dantian and start to bring it back into a more yang state so that it can naturally flow and circulate through the body. And that's why in Taiji Qigong Shibashi, when we finish the form, we never bring our hands back onto the lower dantian or try to focus on this spot. We just allow the qi to either from the movement of set one or the one from set two go back into a more relaxed circulation through the body, and therefore just simply rubbing the palm together to make sure that the harmony at the exchange spot between the yin and yang channel gets soft and doesn't have any tension. So we don't want to bring our hands back into the lower dantian specifically each time we do this. If you want to do a meditative practice or something after the form, that's a little bit different, but we don't finish up here since we've already stimulated the lower dantian, in this case, through the rotation of the qi in the lower dantian, activating it and having a bit more of a younger circulation and more intense so that we feel that the lower dantian has gathered the qi naturally. Taiji Qigong Shibashi being based also on the principle to stimulate the macrocosmic orbit, stimulate the circulation of qi within the body and in connection with heaven and earth. The dantians are naturally receiving the surplus of qi that's circulating and that the body doesn't need. So we're not focusing on specifically trying to build the dantian so that the rest of the channel open. We're focusing on strengthening the channels so that the qi circulate better. Therefore, the dantian will start to fill up because it's the natural reservoir where the surplus of qi can gather. So as we're finishing the form, allowing this movement and this slight acceleration or slight transformation more into a yang feeling of the qi within the lower dantian before we allow it to go back into a natural circulation without our minor movement guiding its flow. The body has a natural 24-hour cycle for which the qi flow through the channel. So by doing the last movement, we're allowing our mind to quiet down, to stop trying to guide in any way through the movement of qi, and allowing it to go back into its natural circulation. And simply rubbing the palm together. And if you feel that you've developed a little bit of tension, you can always do a light patting, self-massage, just to kind of loosen up if need to. If you don't need to, then you just either move on to another set, seated meditation, or finish your practice, depending where you're at during your day at this point. Good. That was a bit of a mouthful of a class, but yeah, I wasn't expecting to do all of it in one shot. Thank you very much for listening. If you guys have any question on either the sixth last movement or the whole form, any of the movements that you didn't write down before, I'll give you a minute or two to chat with you guys a little bit, and then we'll close the session. And I don't know if Deirdre was there during this live, since that was to answer a question. I know a few other people had mentioned that it would be a very good idea. And if you're not, then you're watching this afterwards. Well, I hope this answered your question. And if you're watching it on a replay, feel free to leave your questions or comments in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer. You're here. Cool. You're welcome. Um, Let me see. Raven, how do you know when you're ready for spontaneous? I'm guessing you're referring to spontaneous Qigong practice. Um, I would say spontaneous Qigong practice is not something you want to do on your own. You need a teacher to supervise you before you do that, and ideally in person. So that would be your teacher would let you know by seeing the quality of your movements and most importantly, the quietness of the emotional state of mind. The bigger risk with spontaneous movement is that too much chi could rise to the head and um, kind of move or be taken or hijacked by an emotional state. So there are some guidelines for spontaneous qigong. It should not be done when any type of emotional distress. It should not be done if you have taken any form of external stimulant, that includes 2 or 3 cups of coffee. Any kind of drug is definitely strongly contraindicated. Even certain type of medication that would have ephedrine, pseudoephedrine, any type of boosting medication would be contraindicated with spontaneous qigong. So it's better to wait to be not taking those medication if you want to learn spontaneous qigong. Um, so yeah, it's a good practice, but it's something that requires supervision to be fully safe. If you have more question, we can organize a video chat, and talk a little bit more about it and see where you're at and if there's any ways that I can guide you to reach the level you need faster. But it's not something I would teach online. Although I might be able to, I'm not ready to take that risk, especially if for someone that I'm not familiar with. If it's someone that I've met already in person in the past, then that could be doable. But somebody I haven't met in person, I wouldn't guide them online for that. You're welcome. Um, if you do not perform the movement, circulate properly. Um, that's a good question, Alex. So I'll see if I understand properly. So if you don't perform the movement right, then the chi won't circulate properly. Um, yes and no. That depends on two aspects. The notion of doing a movement right can have a lot of different angle to that. So that's a bit difficult to say what makes a movement right. And the chi won't circulate properly. That also depends on a few different things. What I'll say as a general perspective on this, the better your structural alignment, the easier it will be for the chi to circulate through your body. Also, to refer to the class I did, I don't remember if it was the last or two about relaxation. The more relaxed, the less tension you have in your body, the easier it will be for the chi to flow. So these are kind of very general principles to follow. That being said, you if you wait for your body to be, the perfect athletic body to start to do qigong, you're never gonna do it. And Qigong is helping you to improve the quality of your posture as you're doing it. Therefore, even though we have some tension when we start, we can be a little stiff. Just doing the movement will teach us to learn to become a little bit more relaxed, will teach us to find a way to adjust our posture so that we can feel the flow of Qi better. So it's more of a wide gradient of how useful the movement will be, rather than it's good or it's not. To give you an example of a student I had when I was in Montreal, he was a friend of mine, which I trained martial arts with for a number of years, who was a gentleman who was now, I think, in his 60s, who had very, always very physical, and his body was a bit tense as a general way of being. And so when he first started, even doing the movement, you could see his shoulder, his arm, everything was kind of stuck together. And it took him, I think, over the course of 2 or 3 years doing regularly the Qigong, and really, he completely transformed. Even within the first year of practice, he was still a little stiff, but he could see such a huge improvement in the transformation outside. And even, seeing him from day one versus after a year was a huge difference. Even though he still was a little bit stiff from a average perspective, the quality of what he was doing was a huge improvement. And because he continued, he actually became probably more supple and much more free than a lot of people his age now. So the practice of Qigong is not to try to do things perfectly, it's to use them as a tool to improve the quality of what we do and our quality of life on an everyday basis. Um, Other example that's, I'll take more theoretical, somebody who had an accident, who got an injury, who got like a twisted spine or something, or a broken shoulder, and they can't really move the arm. The chi will start to flow through it, and we'll find ways to make it function as best as possible, even if, for example, there's a muscle or a tendon that's been cut, and therefore there's some movement that are now impossible to do. The tendon is not going to magically like regrow and reattach itself, but the ability to move will become better and better. The functioning of the articulation, because the chi and the fluids will start to go and function, will start to open up, have a better flow, and then the body will find its way to make it work. Ultimately, would it be as good? Will they get as good as they would be if they continue it didn't have this handicap? Probably not. Of course, when the body is in its peak ability, then what you can do is better, but that you can still do a huge amount of things and really improve your health regardless of the physical difficulty you might have at first, and you'll see them transform over time. Hope this answered your question. That was a little bit of a long answer. I need to learn to condense my answer a little bit more. But then again, giving context is usually what allows us to have a broader understanding of everything that's involved, because human body is such a complex machine that you can't have a simple answer. You need to have a clear answer, but you can't make things too simple because then you lose too much. Good. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a beautiful day, and I'll be seeing you all on Wednesday so we can continue. Not sure what we'll do yet, but I'll figure something out. And if you have any suggestion, write them down in the comments. This way it can helps me help you guys go further in your own practice. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll be seeing you shortly. Ciao.